Hello and welcome back. I'm Joshua Barnes and you're watching NewsX World. Let's first take a look at the top stories. Israel has attacked Iran for a fifth day after overnight Iranian strikes, which claims to have targeted Mossad, Israel's intelligence agency. Donald Trump says he wants a real end to the conflict, denying working on a ceasefire. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump has demanded a real end also to Iran's nuclear ambitions, as Israel warns Khamenei could face late Iraqi leader Saddam Hussein's fate amid escalating Iran-Israel strikes. Meanwhile, the Kremlin backed Trump's claim that expulsion from the G8, as it was then called, in 2014 was a mistake, but called the G7 useless for Russia now. Well, in the Middle East, Israeli tank shelling has reportedly killed 59 Palestinians around aid sites in Gaza's Khan Yunis. Meanwhile, the UN rights chief Volker Turk has slammed Israel's warfare for causing what he called horrifying, unconceivable suffering. Zelensky has joined the leaders of Canada seeking G7 support amid Trump's early exit and growing divisions. Meanwhile, Zelensky slams reported Russian strikes that killed 15 in Kyiv as one of the most horrific attacks carried out by Moscow. He also accused Putin of targeting civilians to sustain the war. India's aviation regulator has demanded Air India's crew training records after the crash which killed over 270 people in Ahmedabad. This comes as the Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau launches a full probe looking into flying schools that they face nationwide safety checks. Over 100 people have reportedly been killed in a brutal attack in Yelwata, central Nigeria. This comes amid escalating clashes between herders and farmers over land disputes. President Bola Tinubu is set to visit Benue State as aid agencies rush to help thousands of displaced people. US retailers have seen their biggest drop in 4 months of sales as domestic businesses grapple with the impacts from Trump's global tariff action. Bilateral trade talks have been taking place at the G7 summit in Alberta ahead of the 8th of July tariff deadline. A near 7-mile-high ash cloud has been unleashed after the Mount Lewatobi Laki-Laki volcano erupted in Indonesia. Authorities have raised the alert level to the most dangerous possible, though no deaths have been reported, with the potential flight impact still unclear. We start this hour in North America, in Canada and Alberta, where the G7 summit is continuing into its final day. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney have held a joint press conference at the G7 summit in Canada, where Carney announced a massive $1.46 billion of Canadian military aid package for Ukraine. Kyiv, meanwhile, revised its civilian death toll from a Russian strike down to 10 dead, as Zelensky urged fellow leaders for tougher sanctions and more defence support. Carney also vowed total solidarity with Ukraine, as he also unveiled further sanctions on Russia in an effort to impose maximum pressure on President Vladimir Putin over the ongoing war with Ukraine. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte also arrived at the summit following US President Donald Trump's early exit. Rutte praised Canada's commitment to NATO's 2% military spending target as the summit focused on the Israel-Iran conflict and the war in Ukraine. Trump, who left early amid Middle East tensions, called for Russia to be readmitted into the G7, a move the Kremlin supported while labelling the group useless French President Emmanuel Macron claimed Trump left to broker a ceasefire deal between Israel and Iran, which Trump denied as publicity seeking. The G7's final statement declared Iran must never have a nuclear weapon and called for a ceasefire in Gaza. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi also used his presence to strengthen India's diplomatic footing as the West grapples with internal rifts. Well, lots to discuss there, but that latest update coming from this conference after a bilateral meeting between Volodymyr Zelensky and Canadian leader Mark Carney. Joining us to discuss that and much more is Megha Sharma, our senior executive editor at NewsX World, who's joining us from Banff in Alberta, Canada, close to Kananaskis, where these talks are taking place. Megha, of course, with Donald Trump leaving the summit last night, there were questions raised about how support for Ukraine, both financially, militarily, and also potential sanctions on Russia would play out. But here, Mark Carney taking up that mantle. What more can you tell us?
Yes, I think what would have been ideal for the NATO nations and the G6 nations, and most particularly Ukraine, would have been United States of America coming out in an all-out support for Ukraine, particularly with regards to imposing more sanctions and freezing assets, as well as putting higher price caps on Russian oil. Now, that has obviously not happened. And I doubt that even if US President was present for the bilateral meeting with Vladimir Zelensky, he would have accepted all these proposals that Zelensky would have put forth in front of him. Meanwhile, there have been efforts that have been continuous when we talk about the NATO nations as well as the rest of the G7 nations, who are coming out in full support of Ukraine against Russia by way of providing military support. These $2 billion that have been now announced by Mark Carney to provide military defense support. In fact, EU, we talk about France, Germany, they have spoken at length about how there is a need to further fortify the defense spending by NATO to provide financial and military support to Ukraine. But I think up until US does something major by way of its actions that are going to impact Russia negatively, I don't think there can be much that can be done by the remaining G6 nations. These funds that have been released by Mark Carney in an announcement that was made just a few moments ago. France has in the past few weeks also made a similar announcement of funds being diverted to Ukraine. Germany too has done that, also allowed for its military equipment arsenal, its ballistic missiles to be provided to Ukraine. So I think Russia pins its hopes on United States of America to have at least a balanced stand, if not biased towards Russia. And that's the only way that Russia can be brought to the negotiating table. And Trump definitely put that out in the open, that it was a massive mistake to remove Russia from G8, further reducing the G7's influence on Russia to negotiate deals, and he said the war would not have really happened if Russia continued to be part of G8. So it's a big disappointment for the G6 nations as well as the Ukrainian president, but I don't think Trump was even interested in talking about whether it is the Iran-Israel conflict, because that's the statement that he made right after he arrived here in Kananaskis. He did a media briefing right before the bilateral with Mark Carney, a day before yesterday, and I think he was amply clear. He said, I do not want to talk about Iran, Israel. I'm not going to be part of the team, the G7 team that is going to be signing on the joint statement. He even said that he hardly spoke about the Ukraine-Russia war. All his focus was, in fact, on striking trade deals, which he has done so with at least 3 countries. That's European Union, Canada, and United Kingdom. And if he had more time, if he had spent his day today here at Kananaskis, who knows, there would have been more such constructive talk statements, maybe more deadlines that would have been announced between South Korea and America, maybe India, Brazil, Mexico. So yeah, those are lost opportunities for these countries. But nonetheless, I think the focus. I think Trump wanted to do what he did, finished off his bilaterals, attended the working session, and in wake of the situation that is quickly escalating by the hour, has gone back to his situation room to try to somehow bring an end to this war between Iran and Israel.
Absolutely, Megha Sharma, thank you ever so much for joining us. We'll stick with diplomacy, and we have some more updates for you about the ongoing trade talks, some, of course, which have been taking place and leading to fruitful discussions at the G7. EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen says that the EU and the US have agreed to finalise trade talks by July the 9th, adding that both sides are actively working towards that deadline. I'm going to bring in our guest, Peter Cordillo, who is the Chief Market Economist at Spartan Capital Securities, who is joining us from New York. Peter, thank you for being here. Megha spoke about the significance of Donald Trump leaving, but I'm sure discussions were had between all of the G7 leaders and Trump while he was there about trade, and the EU giving this time frame of the 9th of July. How significant is this in the face of Trump's tariff deadline, which we knew was the 8th of July, regarding that 10% drop, given the global instability and economic instability that's been seen after Trump's Liberation Day in April?
Yes, I think, the fact that it's been the tariff situation has been delayed not once, but several times since the trade war has begun. And the fact that, he left the G7 meeting because of the geopolitical situation between Iran and Israel, obviously is somewhat significant. Now, I'm not sure if, what the outcome is going to be. He has said that Iran might be in for a surprise. And so that leaves the trade issue for the moment on the sidelines. And, going into the G7 meeting, Europe was quite united. And so that indicates to me that it's not going to be an easy sale in terms of getting the European bloc to agree to the United States terms when it comes to tariffs. So I think it's a very delicate situation. And as I said before, since this trade war has begun, it's been postponed for one thing or another. And obviously, the geopolitical crisis that we are in at the moment seems to be the culprit for this postponement.
Yes, absolutely, Peter. Thank you ever so much for joining us. We will now focus our attentions on the Middle East, bringing you further updates from the region. And explosions have continued to rock Iran for a fifth consecutive day as Israel launches its widest strikes yet in the escalating conflict. Blasts were reported in Tehran, Isfahan, Tabriz and Kashan, with dozens dead and key infrastructure damaged. Israel claims to have killed Iran's armed forces chief Ali Shadmani, striking deep inside the capital. Iran says it has retaliated, launching over 400 missiles at Israel, including 8 in the latest volley. Air raid sirens continue to blare across Israeli cities, with 35 missiles breaching defences. President Trump says he seeks a real end to the war while warning Iran against nuclear escalation. Regional fears are mounting, and US President Donald Trump has, of course, sent his warnings. Information being released from the United States relating to the movement of military assets. Tensions continuing to rise and a solution to this conflict in the form of a ceasefire not seeming closer after Donald Trump's statements. I'm first going to go to Anat Bernstein-Reich, who is the president of the Israel-Asia Chamber of Commerce, who is joining us from Tel Aviv. Anat, thank you ever so much for being here. Firstly, we hope that you're okay. We know that there have been, of course, waves of strikes overnight, but it seems that the Israeli defences are acting and stopping those attacks. In terms of an offensive, do you think that the Israeli government is looking at the United States now to bring in their heavy weaponry to really make sure that this conflict can be ended as soon as possible and that all Israeli goals and ambitions are achieved?
So first, good evening. Yes, Israel is doing whatever it can in its capabilities, but the U.S. gear is needed to conclude the mission. And I'm sure that they are in discussion now when U.S. will join the operation. And I hope that once it happens, it will bring all of us closer to conclusion of this Operation Rising Lion, as we call it.
Yes, and Nat, the situation in Iran is concerning for the people living there, but for Israel, this is a targeted attack looking at infrastructure of nuclear bases, but also military infrastructure as well. I want to look at government and administration targets. We know that there have been several leading officials killed by Israel. Is the next step killing Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, as Netanyahu has spoken about and Trump has reportedly already vetoed once?
I'm not, they haven't revealed us their bank of objectives, and as Mr. Netanyahu said, everything is open. I don't think that this is the real target. The real target is to conclude the military nuclear program and eliminate the infrastructure, as you rightly say, the launchers, the missile manufacturing. This missile manufacturing is serving the entire proxy or terror proxies of Iran. It's not just Iran using it. It comes from Yemen, the Houthis, the Hamas in Gaza, the Hezbollah in the north, the Iraqi militias. All of them has ammunition made, designed by Iran, and we want to eliminate their capabilities and to, of course, eliminate the more dangerous ammunition, which is the nuclear weapon that they're developing right now.
Yes, and finally, Anat, to bring an end to this shorter discussion, we are running closer to the end of the programme, but I want to look at those next steps now. Of course, global leaders talking about de-escalation, talking about regional stability, but also the impacts geopolitically. We've seen fuel prices rising off the back of this, of course, civilian death as well, an ongoing instability already in the Middle East. Do you think any global calls for a pause or at least a limiting of Israeli strikes potentially on civilian areas will be heeded, or is this just an all-out attack until Iran's nuclear facilities are completely destroyed?
Israel has a clear message. We want to eliminate or stop their development and capabilities. It will be naive to think that we will be able to terminate it via force, and eventually the Iranians should go into the table. U.S. is trying to, for months, to call them to reach an agreement. So far, they refused. I think that now they'll be more acceptable to give some access to the International Nuclear Commission to observe what they're doing. But I think that the military action was needed. And I truly hope that within a few days we will be able to reach an agreement and a ceasefire. One point to mention: everyone calls Israel for a ceasefire. The joke here is that when we agree to a ceasefire, we cease, and the Iran is firing. So we want a real ceasefire. with all Iran and their proxies, whether it's the Houthis that continuously send missiles at us, or Hezbollah in the north, which has weakened but still active, and Hamas that is very active in Gaza. And in all those fronts, we look forward to a peace and understanding.
Yes, thank you, Anat. I just want to acknowledge that Iran, have said that their military action has only been retaliatory, and that has come after the attacks from Israel across the country. That confirmation. But I do have some updates to bring you just very briefly before we end the programme. Donald Trump has posted on his Truth Social. I'm just going to read it out for you. He says, "We now have complete and total control of the skies over Iran. Iran had good sky trackers and other defensive equipment, and plenty of it, but it doesn't compare to American-made, conceived and manufactured stuff. Nobody does it better than the good old USA." That Trump's statement somewhat cryptic there, but Trump saying that we now have control, complete and total control over the skies of Iran. Of course, this military operation from Israel, the US distanced themselves from it early on. This statement from Donald Trump could potentially be leaning towards a new US rhetoric over that, but we will bring you those updates as we get them, not just, of course, from this ongoing tension in the Middle East that has involvement from the US in some capacity, whether that's just negotiation, but also from geopolitical leaders like those at the